crow is known wherever he is met by his beautiful white deerskin dress and his tall and elegant figure, the greater part of the men being 6 feet high. The Blackfeet, on the other hand, are more of the Herculean make, about middling stature, with broad shoulders and great expansion of chest, and the skins of which their dresses are made are chiefly dressed black, or of a dark brown color, from which circumstance, in all probability, they having black leggings or moccasins, have got the name of Blackfeet. The Crows are very handsome and gentlemanly Indians in their personal appearance, and have been always reputed, since the first acquaintance made with them, very civil and friendly. These people, to be sure, have in some instances plundered and robbed trappers and travelers in their country, and for that I have sometimes heard them called rascals and thieves and rogues of the first order. Yet they do not consider themselves such, for thieving in their estimation is a high crime and considered the most disgraceful act that a man can possibly do. They call this capturing, where they sometimes run off a trader's horses and make their boast of it, considering it a kind of retaliation or summary justice which they think it right and honorable that they should administer. And why not? For the unlicensed trespass committed through their country from one end to the other by mercenary white men who are destroying the game and catching all the beaver and other rich and valuable furs out of their country without paying them an equivalent, or in fact, anything at all, for it. And this too, when they have been warned time and again of the danger they would be in if they longer persisted in the practice. Listener, I look upon the Indian as the most honest and honorable race of people that I ever lived amongst in my life, and in their native state, I pledge you my honor, they are the last of all the human family to pilfer or to steal if you trust to their honor. And for this never-ending and boundless system of theft and plunder and debauchery that is practiced off upon these rightful owners of the soil by acquisitive white men, I consider the infliction or retaliation by driving off and appropriating a few horses but a lenient punishment, which those persons at least should expect, and which, in fact, none but a very honorable and high-minded people could inflict, instead of a much severer one, which they could easily practice upon the few white men in their country without rendering themselves amenable to any law. They are really a handsome and well-formed set of men, as can be seen in any part of the world. There is a sort of ease and grace added to their dignity of manners, which gives them the air of gentlemen at once. Very many of these have cultivated their natural hair to such an almost incredible length that it sweeps the ground as they walk. There are frequent instances of this kind amongst them, and in some cases, a foot or more of it will drag on the grass as they walk, giving exceeding grace and beauty to their movements. They usually oil their hair with a profusion of bear's grease every morning, which is no doubt one cause of the unusual length to which their hair extends, though it cannot be the sole cause of it, for the other tribes throughout this country use the bear's grease in equal profusion without producing the same results. The Mandans, however, and the Sioux have cultivated a very great growth of the hair, as many of them are seen whose hair reaches near to the ground. This extraordinary length of hair amongst the Crows is confined to the men alone. For the women, though all of them with glossy and beautiful hair, and a great profusion of it, are unable to cultivate it to so great a length. Or else, they are not allowed to compete with their lords in a fashion so ornamental, and on which the men so highly pride themselves, and are obliged in many cases to cut it short. The fashion of long hair amongst the men prevails throughout all the western and northwestern tribes after passing the Sacs and Foxes, and the Pawnees of the Platte, who, with 2 or 3 other tribes only, are in the habit of shaving nearly the whole head. George Catlin. 6 years ago in 1842, a fellow named Jim Beckwith, or James P. Beckworth, a mongrel of French, American, and Negro blood, was trading for the fur company in a very large village of the Crows. Jim Beckwith was last summer at St. Louis. He is a ruffian of the first stamp, bloody and treacherous, without honor or honesty. Such at least is the character he bears upon the prairie. Yet in his case, all the standard rules of character fail, for though he will stab a man in his sleep, he will also perform most desperate acts of daring. Such, for instance, as the following story I heard from Paul, a Dakota Sioux. While he, Beckworth, was in the Crow village, a Blackfoot war party, between 30 and 40 in number, came stealing through the country, killing stragglers and carrying off horses. The Crow warriors got upon their trail and pressed them so closely that they could not escape, at which the Blackfeet, throwing up a semicircular breastwork of logs at the foot of a precipice, coolly awaited their approach. The logs and sticks, piled 4 or 5 high, protected them in front. The Crows might have swept over the breastwork and exterminated their enemies, but though outnumbering them tenfold, they did not dream of storming the little fortification. Such a proceeding would be altogether repugnant to their notions of warfare. Whooping and yelling and jumping from side to side like devils incarnate, they showered bullets and arrows upon the logs. Not a Blackfoot was hurt, but several Crows, in spite of their leaping and dodging, were shot down. In this childish manner, the fight went on for an hour or two. Now and then, a Crow warrior in an ecstasy of valor and vainglory would scream forth his war song, boasting himself the bravest and greatest of mankind, and grasping his hatchet, would rush up and strike it upon the breastwork, and then, as he retreated to his companions, fall dead under a shower of arrows. Yet no combined attack seemed to be dreamed of. The Blackfeet remained secure in their entrenchment. At last, Jim Beckwith lost patience. "You are all fools and old women," he said to the Crows. "Come with me, if any of you are brave enough, and I will show you how to fight." He threw off his trapper's frock of buckskin and stripped himself naked like the Indians themselves. He left his rifle on the ground, and taking in his hand a small light hatchet, he ran over the prairie to the right, concealed by a hollow from the eyes of the Blackfeet. Then climbing up the rocks, he gained the top of the precipice behind them. 40 or 50 young Crow warriors followed him. By the cries and whoops that rose from below, he knew that the Blackfeet were just beneath him, and running forward, he leaped down the rock into the midst of them. As he fell, he caught one by the long, loose hair, and dragging him down, tomahawked him. Then grasping another by the belt at his waist, he struck him also a stunning blow, and gaining his feet, shouted the Crow war cry. He swung his hatchet so fiercely around him that the astonished Blackfeet bore back and gave him room. He might, had he chosen, have leaped over the breastwork and escaped. But this was not necessary, for with devilish yells, the Crow warriors came dropping in quick succession over the rock among their enemies. The main body of the Crows, too, answered the cry from the front and rushed up simultaneously. The convulsive struggle within the breastwork was frightful. For an instant, the Blackfeet fought and yelled like pent-up tigers, but the butchery was soon complete, and the mangled bodies lay piled up together under the precipice. Not a Blackfoot made his escape. Joseph Parkman. During the 1870s, the plains suffered a plight of biblical proportions. It was the Rocky Mountain locust. The insects descended by the trillions on the Great Plains, spreading over a vast portion of land, from Montana across to Minnesota and down to Texas. In June 1874, the blue skies all over the American plains went dark. Some likened it to a snowstorm, others to the coming of night. One farmer said he had 15 acres of corn eaten by them yesterday in 3 hours. They mowed it down close to the ground, just as if a mowing machine had cut it. Some farmers built fires around their crops to deter the locusts from landing, but the swarm was so thick that the locusts' sheer numbers smothered the fires and put them out. One pioneer woman said, "You could hear the millions of jaws biting and chewing, and after leaving the house for chores, grasshoppers went back into the house with them. Their clothes were full of grasshoppers. Some jumped into the hot stove where Mary was starting supper. Ma covered the food till they had chased and smashed every grasshopper. She swept them up and shoveled them into the stove. The locusts hit into houses like hail and piled up around buildings. They ate through fabric and leather left in sheds. They ate wool on sheep. The squashed locusts on the railroad tracks made the steel wheels slip and stopped travel. In Missouri, the government required the able-bodied to dedicate 1 or 2 days per week to plowing and killing locust eggs and larvae. In Minnesota, Nicollet County paid its citizens $25,000 for delivering 25,000 bushels of slaughtered locusts. At one stage, the swarm was bigger than the state of California. After many deaths across the plains brought on by starvation, the locusts disappeared, and by 1905, the Rocky Mountain locust had become extinct.